Welcome to Swirl AI Search, the podcast that dives deep into the world of enterprise AI search. Discover how to unlock the value hidden within your internal data and accelerate your journey to actionable insights. Let's cut through the noise and find out how you can get the most out of your internal information. As befitting a podcast about AI, this episode was created with the help of Notebook LM. Please enjoy the Swirl AI Search podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something absolutely critical for pretty much any company dealing with lots of data these days, especially with AI boosting search. It's that vital link between AI search and, well, data security.
Absolutely. It's that classic tightrope walk, isn't it? You need information easy to get for the right people.
But totally locked down for everyone else.
Precisely. And that's, what keeps CSOs up at night. The idea of getting insights fast with AI search, very appealing. But it immediately throws up red flags about, sensitive stuff getting out.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine the nightmare scenario, right? A summer intern, maybe just trying to figure things out, types in a simple search, and bam, suddenly they're looking at confidential executive salaries or, I don't know, details of some top secret project. That's a potential disaster right there.
It really is. And that scenario just highlights how much AI search can amplify existing risks if security isn't baked in right from the very start.
Right.
I mean, balancing access and security, that's not a new problem.
Right.
But the speed, the sheer scale AI operates at, that changes the game completely.
So that's what we're digging into today. We want to understand how a particular approach, the one used by a solution called Swirl, is tackling this head-on by putting security first.
Yeah, making it the priority.
We're talking about the really sensitive stuff, contracts, financials, customer records, internal emails, the kind of info that, if it leaks, huge financial trouble, legal problem.
Definitely, especially in regulated areas, finance, healthcare, government. For them, a search tool that doesn't enforce security really strictly, it's a non-starter. The potential fallout is way too big.
Okay, so that's where Swirl fits in. You're saying it's built differently.
Exactly. Security is core to its design. Make sure that anything you find in a search result has already passed muster against your existing access rules, your company policies.
So security isn't like an optional extra you bolt on later.
No, it's fundamental. And a key part of this is what they call zero ETL. It sounds technical, but the security implication is huge. It delivers the insights without having to physically move or copy your sensitive data all over the place.
Oh, okay. That avoids creating extra copies that could be vulnerable.
Precisely. It inherently cuts down the risk.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit more. Thinking about sort of traditional AI search tools, what makes managing security so tricky there?
Well, the main issue with a lot of conventional AI search tools is, frankly, their design focus. It's usually all about getting the data, retrieving it fast. Security often isn't woven in right at the beginning.
Right.
You can also think of the AI like a really smart, maybe too smart 3-year-old. It'll tell you anything it knows, super eagerly.
Ah.
Okay.
But it has zero concept of discretion, no inherent sense of who should be allowed to see what. That critical piece, the permissions, often feels like an afterthought. That's a great analogy, giving a toddler the keys to the kingdom. And you mentioned moving data around, copying it. Why is that specifically a security headache?
Right. So many AI search setups work by basically sucking up data and copying it into central pools, often things like vector databases, or maybe into the vendor's cloud.
Okay.
Now, this process immediately creates multiple copies of potentially very sensitive data. And those copies, they become really attractive targets, juicy targets for attackers.
Makes sense. More places data lives, more chances for it to leak.
Exactly. And it's not just attackers. There's also the risk of accidental exposure, maybe through misconfigured settings, or maybe just because someone phrases a search query in a clever way that gets around the intended rules in that central system.
So centralizing the data for search can kind of backfire, create new weak spots.
It absolutely can. It can inadvertently create these open doors if you're not incredibly careful with securing that central store.
So it's a double whammy. Then the AI might spill the beans, and the way the data is handled creates more chances for things to go wrong.
That sounds especially worrying for those regulated industries you mentioned, finance, healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. For those folks, a data security lapse isn't just embarrassing. It can mean massive fines, lawsuits, losing customer trust. It's serious business.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not always about hackers from outside. A poorly set up AI search can easily create pathways for internal unauthorized access, too. Think back to our intern.
Right.
Maybe they just phrase a question in a particular way in that big central database, and suddenly they're seeing things way above their pay grade because the system couldn't properly restrict it based on the query phrasing.
Okay, so that paints a clear picture of the risks. How does Swirl's approach, this security-first idea, actually change things?
So Swirl operates on what's called a zero-trust security model. Basically, instead of just assuming someone's okay because they're inside the network,
Zero Trust always verifies. For Swirl, this means it doesn't try to invent a whole new security system. Instead, it smartly taps into and uses the security rules and permissions your organization already has.
okay, so it's not building new walls, it's more like reinforcing the existing ones, making sure they actually work for search.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. Swirl enforces permissions at query time. That's the key phrase.
That query time.
Yeah. When you hit search, Swirl checks your specific access rights for every single potential data source before it even thinks about showing you a result. The basic rule is simple. What the user can't see, the user can't search.
Okay, that sounds pretty definitive.
It is. So even if our intern asks that really broad question, they'll only get back results from data sources they already have explicit permission to access. Nothing more.
That's a huge difference. It basically cuts off that risk of the AI accidentally showing things it shouldn't just because the user asked. Now let's go back to zero ETL. How does that help with security?
Right, the zero ETL approach is really fundamental to Swirl security.
Mm.
Remember, instead of extract, transform, load, pulling data out, changing it, loading it somewhere else,
Yeah.
Swirl queries the data directly where it lives, in its original home. You could think of it like Swirl brings the AI to the data, not the other way around.
Okay, so the AI goes to the data source.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the AI only accesses the bits it needs to answer your specific question. There's no need for massive data copying, no uploading tons of sensitive info to somewhere new.
And fewer copies means fewer vulnerabilities.
Precisely. It drastically cuts down the number of places where things could potentially go wrong.
So the data stays put, safe in its original secure spot. The risk of it being exposed during transfer or sitting in some new, maybe less secure database that's just gone.
Largely eliminated, yes. It's a huge security advantage, especially for that really sensitive stuff. And for companies needing the absolute highest level of security. Swirl can even run completely air-gapped, disconnected from outside networks, using AI models that are approved to run locally.
Wow. Okay, so maximum control.
Maximum control. But the main point is, Swirl works with your existing security policies. It strengthens them. It doesn't create new risks. You literally cannot stumble across data in a search if that data never moved and your permissions say no access.
Okay, the security focus is crystal clear. But what about the other side? Accessibility. You often hear that tightening security makes it harder for people to find what they actually need to do their jobs. It slows things down. How does Swirl handle that trade-off?
Yeah, that's the classic enterprise search headache, right?
Yep.
Lock it down too tight, nobody can find anything, productivity tanks. Open it up too much, data gets exposed.
Exactly.
Swirl's goal is really to just eliminate that trade-off altogether. Because it checks permissions granularly right when the query happens, it lets employees get the insights they need efficiently while strictly following the security rules already in place.
So the intern, in our example,
The intern can still find whatever information is relevant and permitted for their role. They just won't accidentally pull up executive P&L statements because of how they phrase the search.
can we walk through maybe a more specific example? How would this play out practically?
Sure. Let's say you've got a legal team and they need to find contract clauses related to risk exposure.
Okay.
Now, with a more traditional AI search that probably hoovered up all the contract data into one big central index,
Uh-huh.
the system might just return every contract with those keywords.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily know or check carefully enough if this specific legal team is actually authorized to see every single one of those contracts.
Right. They might only be cleared for certain departments or project contracts.
Exactly. So they could easily end up seeing highly sensitive agreements they have no business viewing simply because the centralized system couldn't differentiate well enough or the query was phrased cleverly. That's a potential compliance disaster.
Yeah, definitely sounds like one. So how does Swirl change that picture?
Okay, same legal team, same search query and Swirl. What happens? The AI only shows them the contracts that they are specifically allowed to see based on the company's existing permission setup.
Because it checks before showing results.
Precisely. It's genuinely permission-aware AI search, but it doesn't kill usability. They get the info they need fast, but they physically cannot access anything outside their approved scope in how they try to word the query.
Because the data they can't see isn't even part of the searchable pool for them, right? It's stayed put.
Exactly. The data isn't centralized in a way that lets clever queries bypass the original source controls. Permissions are checked every single time. That risk of accidental oversharing, it's virtually gone.
So it's not just guarding against hackers or rogue employees. It's also preventing those honest mistakes, those oops, didn't mean to find that moments that can happen just because of how the search engine itself is built.
That's a huge part of it. And the benefits go beyond just stopping bad things from happening. This kind of secure AI search actually speeds things up.
How so?
Well, people can find what they need faster, and they can trust that they're allowed to see it. They're not second-guessing or wasting time navigating complex access rules manually. Decision-making gets quicker, and compliance is maintained.
Any proof of that, like real-world results.
Yeah, actually, we saw data from a Fortune 500 company. They reported a 20% jump in productive time after putting Swirl in place.
20% just from better searching.
Just by slashing the time people spent hunting for information. And crucially, they did that while maintaining their strict security posture. It wasn't a trade-off.
Wow, that's impressive. It really drives home the point that strong security doesn't have to slow you down. It can actually enable faster work by building trust.
Absolutely. It's really Swirl's whole goal. Make AI search incredibly smart and powerful, yes, but also make it fundamentally safe, permission-aware, and truly enterprise-ready for today's complex environments.
Okay, so let's kind of wrap this up. The big takeaway seems to be that when we talk about AI search in business, security isn't just like a nice-to-have feature.
No, it's foundational, non-negotiable.
You absolutely cannot risk exposing sensitive data. That intern scenario or anyone unauthorized getting access through a poorly secured search, it's just not acceptable.
Not acceptable at all. Companies need quick access to data, sure. They need it to compete, to make smart decisions. But they cannot cut corners on security or compliance to get there.
Especially with those centralized systems where, as you said, the wrong query might open the wrong door.
Exactly. That potential for a seemingly harmless search to expose things in those big data pools is precisely the risk Swirl tackles by leaving data where it belongs and checking permissions constantly.
And Swirl then is positioned as the way to bridge that gap using that zero trust security, that zero ETL approach.
To make AI search both super effective and fundamentally secure.
Right. Its core promise seems pretty clear.
Yeah, it's straightforward and, frankly, reassuring. Find what you need without exposing what you shouldn't.
So for anyone listening who's wrestling with this, how to use AI search safely, how to make sure sensitive data stays locked down but accessible to the right people, well, you can check out Swirl. They offer free trials too. We'll put links for all that in the show notes. And they also have a newsletter, apparently, to keep up with AI news and updates.
Good resources. And this all leads to, I think, a really critical question for everyone listening to think about for their own organization.
Yeah.
In this world that's just getting more and more data-driven, how is going to make sure that the amazing power of AI search doesn't accidentally become your single biggest security nightmare?
Oof. Yeah.
What steps can you actually take proactively to get that balance right? Access for those who need it, protection against everyone else, especially given the different risks between, say, centralized data approaches versus keeping data secure at the source. That's something worth really digging into with your teams.